today I want to talk to you about marriage and family. And of course, you're in the marriage and family class, so you expect that. But I want to talk about the church's role in strong marriages and healthy families. Mm-hmm. So marriage and family issues are at the top of issues that people often seek out counseling. Mm-hmm. Whether it's communication issues or whatever it is, it's one of the top things that people want counseling for. And this type of counseling in the past was often provided by the church, mm-hmm. by the person's pastor, the family pastor. However, nowadays, people often seek out, and most often seek out marriage counseling from secular sources, mm-hmm. whether it's a marriage and family therapist or psychologist. A lot of times it's from secular sources. But it's kind of hard to blame them for that. The church has its own issues, and we know that. Although the divorce rates are lower among active believers, we still have our share of broken relationships in the mm-hmm. church. And according to CBN News, domestic violence is a silent epidemic inside the church walls. Mm-hmm. And that includes more than just physical violence. That's emotional, financial, even spiritual abuse that's involved with that. In all this time, domestic violence is also a bigger problem. It's not just a silent epidemic in the church, but it's become such a problem in our world that the World Health Organization has referred to it as a global health problem of epidemic proportions. And they've called on global efforts to help deal with the violence by addressing social and cultural issues that are behind it. So what happened in American culture that has contributed to the problems that we see today? I'm sure that you guys could maybe throw out some answers to that, but in 2015, the Defense of Marriage Act was overruled, repealed by the Senate or by the Supreme Court, and since then, it seems like our culture has worked hard to promote a different way of thinking about what a family should look like and what a marriage should look like, even whether marriage is important at all. And so the importance of marriage, because of that, has diminished in the minds of a lot of people. And a lot of couples choose to remain unmarried but raise a family together, and that's become more and more common. The idea of changed quite a bit from maybe in the past, where people would say a family is a mother and a father and kids, right? A couple of them said, two people that love each other. The focus is less on what historically constitute a family, and more on what's right for me today. It's a different focus. So I want to talk to you about why is it important to emphasize a healthy family and a healthy marriage. So the first one is that it's a building block of civilization. Marriage is the basis of family, and family is the essential building block of a society, of civilization. Sociologists are interested in the relationship between the institution of marriage and the institution of family because historically, marriages are what created family, right? And families are the most basic social unit on which a society is built. Both marriage and family create status roles that society sanctions. So whatever society sanctions as, these members of family. So that's why the video was kind of interesting to hear. And I'm always interested to hear what people would think constitutes a family, because it's way different than it was 50 years ago. Secondly, we need to promote healthy marriage to provide stable and healthy home environments for children. Research is overwhelming that children raised by both mother and father in the home do a whole lot better in a lot of different areas. Children in single parent homes have more trouble with the law. They're more likely to end up in prison than children in families with both a mother and father. They experience more teen pregnancy, more drug addiction, and they perform far worse in school. One researcher said that boys are half as likely to have trouble with the law if they're raised by their father. Boys apart from their dad are twice as likely to be in prison before age 32. Now, these are what the stats show. Girls also do better when their dad is pregnant. Girls are 7 times less likely to be pregnant as teenagers if their dad is involved in their life. So, the presence of both family members is very important. The presence of the father for the daughter encourages them to save themselves for a marriage relationship, or for a man who is worthy of showing them time and attention. Physical and sexual abuse also have higher numbers in cohabitating versus married households. The third reason that we need to promote healthy marriage is that it benefits society. And we could go really in depth with each one of these. I don't have the time to do that, but the Brookings Institution reports that we would have 25% less poverty if our marriage rates were the same as they were in 1970. Can you believe that? 25% less poverty. That blows my mind. I'm just thinking about the impact that even on the poverty rate that families have and strong marriages have to society. For a majority of Americans, even today, the church seems a natural link. We'll get to this poll in a minute, but the church seems a natural link to resources for building stronger families and stronger marriages. And I think the reason for that is that a lot of people are married in church or married by someone with credentials, with a church or a denomination. That's actually becoming less common today, which, I'm sure you can believe that. The number of people actually getting married, this is a statistic from last year, between 2009 and 2017, a period of 8 years, declined from 41% to 22%. That much of a decline just in 8 years. We'll just let the phone ring for right now. To me, I think maybe this is linked to a secularization of our culture. Our culture has definitely become more secularized. But it's not just about a decline in faith. With Americans that are more mobile, almost everybody has a smartphone today. They're atomized and they're rootless. They don't have the same roots that they had before, and a lot of them don't have connection to a religious house, a religious congregation where they live or where they came from. So when rites of passage like marriage come up, or even death, they're less likely to go to the church for that. So I want to do a quick 2-minute poll, and if you got the link through my text message, you can vote here, and we'll see the results in live here on our screen. So I'm going to reload this and give this to Deb. I'll let you vote. And then hopefully I can give it to to Joe. I'm sorry, I keep calling you Tom. To Joe, Tom's on my line. Okay.
You can reset that and I'll pass it over to you.
Okay. All right. Let me reset this. Oh, it won't let me do it again.
Oh.
It take it. And if I was voting, I would also say no. That churches in general don't do enough to promote happy marriages. So a 2005 research poll and I realize this is kind of an old statistic, but this was of 800 churches, indicated that only 28% of the churches in the U.S., because they tried to poll around the U.S., only 28% of them offer even one marriage class a year. 28%, and that seems high to me. So I think our churches can do much better, and so I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. Every church should be called upon to provide at the least premarital counseling, as well as marriage preparation for singles, and regular marriage enrichment courses. So I want to talk a little bit about, and I mentioned this before, a lot of people see the church, if they got married in church, the church should provide some counsel. If we are marrying you, we should provide some help on, having a happy and healthy marriage and family. So I want to talk a little bit about some characteristics. This is definitely not all characteristics of churches that promote healthy marriages, but I'm going to give you 5 to think about. So the first one is a church that promotes healthy marriage will provide at least one series that promotes healthy marriage a year. At least one a year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The second one is that they'll have strong ministry to children, to youth, and also to singles. The third characteristic is they'll provide marriage enrichment resources, and not just to church members, but to the community around. Fourth characteristic is that they provide practical marriage advice. They deal with the questions that maybe the church has avoided or been silent on too long. And the fifth one is they emphasize the idea that marriage is a vocation. It's not just something you do. It's not just two people that are happy together. There's more to it. It's a calling. It really is. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. So the first one here is the church that is doing the right things to promote happy or healthy marriages and strong families will provide a marriage focused preaching at least once a year. This church preaches about what marriage should look like, and they're consistent with the teaching. And besides one series a year, if not more than that, they emphasize it throughout the year, and they show an example of what that looks like. People want and need to hear it. Even single people in our church can benefit from hearing about what a strong marriage looks like and what God expects from us as Christians, about marriage. So some of the best feedback during our marriage sermons comes from single people. I mean, we've done that in our church, and single people that are divorced, sometimes they have the best feedback. The better that we understand God's plan for premarital counseling and for marriage, the better that we understand what relationships should look like, and that includes our relationship with God. So marriage, by God's design, is it's the foundation of family. Building stronger marriages will lead to building stronger families. Stronger families create stronger churches, and that leads to stronger communities, stronger cities, and a better world overall. Marriage is uniquely and sacredly designed to display God's kingdom on earth. Marriage in the Bible is a representation of God's relationship with His church. And so we need to show what that looks like, and we need to show it practically. When marriages improve, just about everything else improves as a result. Everybody's lives improve in a marriage that is strong. When marriages are hurting, society is hurting. So the second characteristic here is a strong children's, youth, and singles ministry. We need to teach our kids and our young people why marriage is important. I mean, I mentioned before that our society has begun looking at marriages as not even necessary. There's less marriage and more people living together and raising a family together outside of marriage. Why strong families make a difference, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, and practically. We need to provide practical information about healthy relationships to our youth and singles, so that as they date, as they begin to develop relationships, they know what to look for, they know what to pray for, and they know how to behave in a relationship. Marriage preparation starts long before couples get engaged, right? It begins really at birth. When a child is born to a couple, to the family, that's when the training starts. The child sees how the parents behave towards each other and towards their siblings, and that's what starts to teach them. Whether it's bad or good, is up to the parents. In surveys, church leaders noted that by reaching out to young people in the church and inviting them into a friendship with Christ first, the groundwork is laid for stronger marriage. Marriage enrichment resources. There are so many different types of resources that a church can provide. Books, videos, a library of resources. If they can make that available to their people and to the community, that by itself will reach a lot of people. You don't have to put a massive financial investment into it for a church to provide resources. Making marriage a priority in the church ministry is one of the most effective ways to build stronger families and stronger churches. And that has an eternal impact. It's not just an investment that pays off now, but later. So when churches are stronger as a result of stronger families and stronger marriages, God is glorified and the world is a better place for it. We can offer marriage retreats, right? Maybe smaller churches, that's something to work up to, but that is always a good time to allow parents especially with kids, to get away from the kids and spend time on their relationship with each other. And that's really important for the health of the marriage. I found my husband and I don't have kids, and I think that's been I'm not saying kids are a bad thing, but we've had time to really build our friendship and deepen it together. I know that a lot of times kids can kind of detract from that because you're so focused on taking care of them, you're not taking care of each other. So that time to get away and have enrichment, marriage enrichment is very important. Maybe create a volunteer team of marriage coaches. I know one of the big churches in Columbus here, Vineyard Columbus, offers marriage coaches, and they're all volunteers. They're all trained by the church, and they work side by side with young couples to help mentor them in what a strong marriage looks like. So that's an idea to provide that. Just marriage classes, or even table talk time where you just bring people together to ask and answer questions. Let the people that have answers answer the questions that the people that have questions ask. And just even that is a big thing. One thing that we're going to offer is what's called date night. And it'll be a time when people can come together and learn how to deal with conflict. And you don't have to be married to every relationship has conflict. So, I mean, there are different things you can do, whether you get a DVD series and just offer that as a class to your church members or to the community, or whatever it is. You know, there's so many options out there, especially with everybody being connected. So the next characteristic of a church that promotes healthy families and healthy marriages is we address practical concerns and questions that people in our church have. It seems like the younger generation especially has a lot of questions, and they, when the church is quiet about issues like gay marriage or living together outside of marriage, when the church is silent, well, they look at somewhere else for answers. We have answers, and we shouldn't be afraid to stand up and talk about things. Be willing to address some of these issues and questions that our culture is all into right now. And there's so many, and it can be polarizing to a church if we don't address it, if we don't stand up and address it. We have answers. You know, God has the answers for some of these questions and these issues. And so when the church is willing to do that with the community, I just as an aside, yesterday I was in a meeting of pastors in Columbus, Vineyard pastors, and one of them was talking about how they had, I can't remember what he called it, but it was a time where they had a particular question that they put out there that they just offered a time in the evening, like an hour or two, where in an informal setting they just talked about gay marriage and all the questions that come up, and so for the church to be the ones to do that is huge. It says a lot to our society. So the next characteristic is we talk about marriage and family as a sacred vocation. Being married is sacred. It's a sacred covenant before God. Having children is a sacred responsibility. And the church that emphasizes it as a sacred thing is the church that's doing a good job addressing issues. I know the Catholic Church uses the word vocation to talk about marriage. And I honestly haven't heard that in the Vineyard much, but I think that we need to emphasize how sacred it is. It's not something you just do on a whim. Marriage is primarily calling spouses to come together and to lead each other and lead their children to heaven, right? I mean, really, a marriage is about two people that are working together, like the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. We make each other stronger as believers, and we lead our children in the same direction. The work in a marriage is that of sanctification and pursuing holiness. It's a constant battle. Marriage may assist in the personal salvation of others. The people outside our church that see us have healthy and happy marriages, that's a testimony to them as well. And so that's a reflection of God's love, and it draws people to Him because of that. So as we kind of come to the end of the lecture time, I want to take a few minutes, and I want you to think about, does your church do enough to promote healthy marriage? Now, all of you are leaders in your church, and so I want you to spend about a minute just thinking about what your church does to promote marriage today. And then I'm going to give you a minute to think about it, and then I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, and you're going to pair up as teams, and you're going to talk about what your thoughts are on that question. Does your church, specifically your church, do enough to promote it? And if not, what can they do to improve? So does your church do enough, and what are some ideas that they can do to improve? So I want you to really evaluate your own church situation right now. And if you need paper, I've got paper here that you can use to write down ideas. I've got a couple of pens here as well. And so after you spend a minute or two thinking about it and writing down some notes, then, pick someone in your group to be the one that kind of talks about what you come up with. And hopefully all those pens work. So go ahead and do that. Okay, now I want you to pair up together. Martha and Nadia, you guys can pair up, and then Joe and Deb. Pair up and just spend a couple minutes talking about your ideas, and come up with a list of things. If your church does do enough, maybe in a minute I'll have you share what those things are, and if they don't, share what you think they can do to improve. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to do that.
Okay, well, I know where I stand on this issue, so I'll let you go first before I tell you you're wrong. Okay?
We're talking about terminology we haven't even defined.
I mean, it does seem like they do a lot.
Either word.
Okay.
I don't know if I can say if they do. I guess you can always think of doing more. Maybe.
Well, I think it has improved greatly. First initial vote, where it said, does the church do enough? I was the only one that said yes.
Really?
Because we're now because there's
whose focus is that?
I feel that the church does enough.
I agree completely.
And specifically
but
the
this, I think, is the specific.
And I know that they offer a lot of different classes that focuses on marriage, such as To Become One. There's a workshop that they offer. I know that they offer workshops for couples that are already in a marriage. I know they offer another workshop for the pre-marriage thing. So I know that they do offer a lot of different options for people that are thinking of becoming married, what there has to do to go down that path, from the dating front, from the dating aspect, to the, okay, we're getting ready to get married, the To Become One, to that we're already married, what do they do now, and the singles, too. I know they offer at least 2 or 3 different options, workshops and things, for singles to say, what's it becoming a healthy single, what to look for in a healthy relationship while being single. So, from my point of view, I think that the Vineyard Church does a lot. And even outside of the Vineyard Church, looking at other churches, I think that they really do a lot. I think it's adequate, from the standpoint that the marriage is an important thing, especially in this society. I mean, back in the 50s when I was born, it was the norm to say you get married or there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
To now, there's so many different options that, you can get married, you can not get married, you can just live together. You don't even have to have a relationship with an opposite sex, it's just, there's so many different options out there.
Diversity.
And the more options that there are, the more choices that there are, and the more choices that you will make a wrong choice. So, in my opinion, I think the church does a very adequate job, and particularly the Vineyard Church.
Okay,
So that's my opinion.
So now we're gonna get
Okay.
to the share time, and I'm gonna give each group about a minute and a half each to talk about what you came up with. So we'll start with
And I'm not, it's your
start
turn
with,
to talk now.
your group first, and let me know what was your answer to the first
Both of
part.
us, I think both of us. First of all, we're pleased with the fact that our church has enough focus on marriage to have a marriage pastor. That emphasizes it within the church, and is a very good thing. On the other hand, I particularly brought out the fact that we're actually talking terminology we haven't defined. What is a marriage? You were talking about that, about the multitude of choices, about what can be. You see these big billboards.
There's one.
There's
Still,
one just
yeah.
almost right across the street that says one man and one woman
Yeah.
is holy matrimony. And it's like, if you're a secular person looking at that, it's like, who says? I mean, so even the words, what good does it do to talk about holy, matrimony, marriage, or healthy if we don't know what we're talking about
Right.
and we don't demonstrate it
Right.
and have evidence of it?
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a good point.
particularly the word healthy, I kind of flinch when I see that. Having been exposed to multiple churches that define healthy as man dominant, rather than a biblical view of the marriage,
Yes.
and what that means, and so there's multiple issues there that I think need to be addressed. And you had some others, I think, maybe.
Oh, I just said, encouraging a reminder for current married couples in regards to the roles, not so much roles, but the significance of the marriage and appreciation of each other, and just redefining marriage and healthy in terms of the meaning.
Right.
The one other thing I would add is and as long as I grew up in the church, been in the church, I have never heard a sermon addressing the meaning of one flesh. When it says that if you join your body to a prostitute, you become one flesh. So if sex makes you one flesh in the spiritual world, what does that imply for multiple partners and the spiritual consequences of that, either going into marriage or within marriage? And the fact that opens a portal that the demons can flow back and forth between the people, and we don't address the consequences of what does it mean to be one flesh within a marriage.
That's a good point. That's one of those. I mean, the church likes to tiptoe around certain things because it might be messy, or
But it's actually one of the sermons I've experienced that has stuck with me.
Yeah.
In regards to soul ties and those physical relationships outside of marriage.
That's good. That's a good point. All right, what did you guys come up with?
Well, I just said, just from talking with Deborah, sounds like with the vendor that they do offer a lot, if not enough.
So your church does a great job of promoting.
It's probably a matter of taking advantage of those resources.
That's it. The resources are there, and they have to take advantage of it. But maybe, and when the classes come about, I think that they are mentioned